Hello and welcome to the fourth episode of JudgeStone. For today, October 2nd, 2017, I am Justice, the founder of Judgment Gaming, former professional Hearthstone journalist and analyst. I am joined, as always, by Owen and our host, Shinfitz. How are you guys doing?
Pretty good. Yourself?
Doing all right, doing all right. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and dive right into things. Fitz, what do you have for us today?
So, since the best month of the year has begun, October, the month of fall, the month of Halloween, I can't think of any other better things than these two things, but since we have a new month, we do have a new season. So, what do you guys think are going to be good picks for ladder this season? I'll let whoever wants to start. So.
We get to fight.
I mean, I would definitely say that certainly any deck that's going to be able to capitalize on Death Rattle minions, just because it's very flavorful for the month of October. That's my pick.
Yes.
Yeah. Nice.
Certainly, decks that use Wisp are going to be especially thematic.
Oh
yeah. Well, come on now. Top tier is maybe a little bit stretching it, but we gotta definitely avoid the cute minions this month. Too bad for the Penguins. So, but in all seriousness, definitely with a new season, you want to be conscientious, as we only have so much time to grind up to the fabled legend rank. So for anyone who's looking to do that for the first time this month, or maybe if they've done it before, I think it would probably be a good way to kind of start off the conversation by talking about what types of decks are successful in ladder. And I think, first in a way, the most successful decks are going to have, success with it are going to be like aggressive strategies. One of the things that ladder definitely incentivizes is being able to grind through as many games as possible. And so the way that the ladder is structured, it kind of incentivizes you to play just as many rapid games as possible. So even if you might have a deck that, has a higher win percentage but takes, 2 or 3 times as long, it may be better for you to play more games in rapid succession, even though your win rate might be slightly lower. Justice, do you think you can expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's actually going to lead into one thing I wanted to talk about, because I'm going to kind of do a hybrid version of this, which is decks you want to play and decks you don't want to be playing. So I think a great example of a deck that, particularly if you're not already a legend rank player, or someone who's hit legend a lot, that even though you might have that overall has a strong power level that isn't worth trying to ladder with quickly right now, is like something like Rizaka's Priest, for example, because of 2 reasons, which is that A, its win rate is definitely a whole lot better with players that have been playing it for a long time and that are very good, because it is a very high skill cap deck, and someone just picking it up for the first time is going to need a fair number of games to really start to be able to pilot the deck effectively. Plus, it is a slower deck. It's not something that is, generally winning 5, 6, 7-minute games. So it's something you have to put a lot of time into. So if your goal is to rank up quickly and you don't have, a lot of hours every day to be putting into Hearthstone, something like Rizaka's Priest is a deck that could look good on paper because it is objectively a strong deck, but is not necessarily your most efficient choice for laddering if you're just trying to hit legend as quickly as possible.
So I had a question. You said something there that I thought was kind of something that we could definitely talk about a little bit. You said it's a high skill cap deck. What exactly do you mean by that?
I mean that while all decks in Hearthstone are obviously better, the more skilled the player is and the more time a player has put into a deck, certain decks require more time and more thought in-game to really pilot as effectively as possible, which is really what a higher skill cap deck is. So while all decks will have some decision-making required, there's no deck that is literally autopilot, despite what some members of the Reddit community might want to claim. There are certainly decks that challenge you more to make decisions, especially on a turn-by-turn basis. So in the case of Rizaka's Priest, for example, because your deck only has 1 copy of every card, it's very important to say, all right, is it worth using my Shadow Word Pain or my Shadow Word Death on this minion? Am I okay with no longer having access to this effect for the rest of the game? And you are basically challenged with that decision with every single card that you play with that deck. You always have to keep in mind, okay, if I play this card here, I don't have this effect anymore for the rest of the game. am I okay with that? And then you have to think about, okay, here's the threat that I'm facing right now. Is there a threat that I'm likely to face in the near future that I'm going to need to save this card for? So you need to be much more efficient with your card usage, as opposed to a deck that, say, maybe is running 2 of a lot of things, because there you might be forgiven for wasting, or quote-unquote wasting, one of your removal effects, because you might just be able to draw a second one. In a deck like Rizaka's Priest, you can't. Once it's gone, it's gone. So it just challenges you a little bit more kind of at every step of the way, which is why even pro players took a while to really start mastering the deck, and even some of them didn't. We even saw, in tournaments with some, professional players that were misplaying the deck. And that's not uncommon because they didn't take a ton of time playing it before the tournament, but they knew it was strong and they trusted themselves. So if a pro player is going to be misplaying a deck with not a ton of practice, then the average player certainly is going to struggle that much more with it. So that's really what you're looking at with a high skill cap deck, is just how to what degree and how often is it challenging you to make difficult decisions that can affect very significantly your overall win percentage, either in that game itself or overall.
So if someone's not, let's say, it's a relatively new player, been playing for maybe 2 or 3 months, have had some medium success on the ladder, maybe hit like rank 10 or rank 15 even, and they say, all right, this season I'm hitting Legend. Mm-hmm. Would you advise them to avoid high skill cap decks just because of the extra work they'd have to put in to try and win with them? Or do you think that a high skill cap deck is okay, even if it has a, fast enough game time?
Well, it's an interesting question, and I think there is no one correct answer to that. I think it's very much dependent upon the individual player. For the player whose main goal is, I want to rank up as quickly as possible, and that's their only concern, then yeah, I would say stick to decks that don't offer as much challenge in the way of general decision making. For a player whose goal is more, I have time, I want to put in the time, and I want to not just try to hit Legend.
Time out.
Yes.
Well, before that deck that you just mentioned,
mm-hmm.
that you don't have to put a lot of thought into, what are examples of that kind of deck right now?
You'd be looking at decks that have a slightly more straightforward game plan. So in terms of decks that are strong at the moment, I would say something, and I want to get back to this deck in a little while, but we'll just touch on it right now. Something like the new Tempo Rogue, which has taken the ladder by storm, is the game plan is fairly straightforward. Obviously, ideally, you want Keliseth on 2, and with a Shadow Step, it's even better. And you just want to kind of play your big minions, get board control early, and just overwhelm your opponent within 5 or 6 turns.
Well, actually, I just before you expand on that, I do actually disagree with you there, because that's kind of the deck that I was referring to. I feel that deck has a very high skill cap but a very short game time.
Mm-hmm.
So I was wondering the value of playing a high skill cap deck, even though it's a quick game, like that deck, versus playing a lower skill cap deck, such as maybe something that's a little bit more linear, like a Pirate Warrior or something, or Token Druid.
Right. Well, it's interesting, I guess, because you got to look at, and so I think that's actually a really great talking point. Is obviously, even while you and I agree on a lot of things, we might have a slightly different opinion on exactly what decks are higher skill cap. Because I've played a bit of the Tempo Rogue, and I like it a lot. Actually, it really suits my playstyle a lot, because it plays kind of a hybrid of aggro and mid range, in that it's aggressive but doesn't just lose come mid game, which is nice. I guess for me, when I'm saying higher skill cap, I mean decks that don't have as straightforward a game plan, because while there are definitely decisions to be made with that deck, as I said, that is your game plan, is have your decent sized minions overtake the board early, overwhelm opponent. That is basically your game plan, almost regardless of what kind of deck you're playing against. Now, with that said, as I said, there's always going to be decisions to be made. Any deck, even the most straightforward of decks, you'll always see a huge difference between players that really know what they're doing, that put a lot of time with them, and players that are just picking them up, or that don't have as strong game knowledge. So even with the most straightforward decks, there's going to be a huge difference between those two players in the way that they play the decks. So there is no, as I said earlier, there is no just straight autopilot deck. which I think is an important point to be aware of, because again, people online, especially those who are salty when they just lost to something, they say, oh, that deck takes no skill, it just plays itself, you just play on curve and win. There is literally no deck that requires no thought at all and will have the same win rate played by a player who's played 100 games with it compared to someone who's just picking it up for the first time. That deck does not exist. But I would call something like Razaka's Priestess a higher skill cap deck because, as I said, there's more intricate decisions to be made, there's more challenging decisions to be made at pretty much every turn. And that to me is just how much is your deck challenging your game knowledge and your ability to not just play for this turn, but 2, 3, 4, 5 turns ahead in the future. How much is it challenging your ability to not just look at your own cards, but to really have to try to predict what your opponent might be throwing at you in the next few turns and to plan ahead for that as well. So that's really, I think, where some decks kind of start to separate themselves as far as the overall skill cap. So to get back to the original question of what makes sense for players to be playing, so as I said, it kind of depends on what they're looking for. If they're looking for just a quick as possible ladder climb, then yeah, you want something fairly aggressive with a fairly straightforward game plan that allows you to play a very similar game regardless of your opponent. But for the player who says, yeah, I want to hit legend, but I also want to become a better player in the process, and I'm not just trying to hit legend right now, but I want to become the type of player that can hit legend every month, then that player wants to vary their playstyle a bit. That player is not just looking for the quickest way to hit legend. That player is looking for a way to expand their game knowledge, and those higher skill cap decks are going to help them do that in a different way. Because again, as I said, there's more things you have to think about. You have to plan ahead more, both on your own turn and what your opponent's going to be doing. You have more decisions to make, so it will be slower. So I said, if speed is your main concern, is different than if I want to hit legend, but I really want to expand my overall game knowledge at the same time. So it really depends on what kind of player we're talking about, as far as what deck is going to be best for them to try to ladder with.
Okay, so taking that information into account, what are your top 2 picks for laddering right now, Fitzroy? Do you have what are your top 2 picks right now for ladder?
I'm the wrong guy for this. I'm getting beat up in ladder. I've been experiencing, and Owen, I spoke to you about this. I've only seen 2 types of decks. Ladder is actually pretty frustrating for me right now. Where I'm at, I guess in my stage, because Owen, you said you haven't seen a lot of this. I've only seen extremely fast.
Oh.
Where I lose. Long-winded decks where I lose turn 54 and nothing in between. So I have no idea. My input is not very valid on this topic in particular.
Well, I mean, I would disagree actually, because I think that because you're on a lower end of the ladder, your input is probably a lot more valid than maybe Justice or Eyes would be, since both him and I both started a higher point on the ladder, and so our meta is going to be somewhat different than the meta that you might be experiencing at this stage of the early season.
Sorry, we're going to talk about that more later.
Sure.
Well, I haven't really cracked, I guess, what deck I need to use to win more games. So I'm not entirely sure right now. I've been trying to use decks that are more aggressive and not, because I guess what I normally used to ladder was what was it, Quest Warrior, and it's kind of not in the best spot right now. So I'm just looking for something that's a little bit more aggressive, where I'm not just playing taunt minions every turn.
Let me ask you a question, Fitz, and this is pure, somewhat out of curiosity, and somewhat to see if we can maybe offer some insight both to you personally and to those out there that are maybe in a similar position to you. Because again, what a lot of people don't realize is the vast majority of people, rank 15 is the high end of where they end up on the ladder, and sometimes it's below that. Rank 10 and up is actually not the majority of the Hearthstone player base. So this is actually a very relevant topic. Let me ask you this: in a perfect world, you can play any kind of deck and have success with it, whether it be very aggressive or somewhat mid-range strategy or control or a combo or anywhere in there. You get to design what kind of deck you get to play that you're going to have success with. What would you consider to be your personal Hearthstone play style that you would like to play?
Mm, I don't know. I'm not really sure. I think I'm more of a oh geez, what are the three Magic players again, Owen? It's like
Johnny, Timmy, and Spike.
Yeah.
right. I forget.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's Johnny, Jenny, Timmy, Tammy, or Spike.
Oh. Is Spike unisex? I mean, I guess,
the
right?
player.
Yes.
All right, I'm down with it. Okay.
I'm the player that likes to like I just like playing like what I want to play. So like I feel like being like a wizard right now. So I'll play mage. Not necessarily because mage is good right now because of whatever mechanics it has. So I'm more on that like aspect of it.
Okay, I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the reason that I ask is that one of the other things that kind of affects one's success is playing a deck or a type of deck or a style that suits you and that you feel comfortable with. Because I could tell somebody, hey, you know what, here's this aggro deck and it's really good if you just want to ladder quickly, but if that player has no comfort level with aggro and is not ready for, well, if I don't win by turn 6 or 7, I kind of run out of steam, I just lose, and they don't really know what to do with that, then that's not necessarily the best advice for them. So that's something that I want, especially, you know, kind of like mid-level players to really consider too, is just because someone tells you that X deck is really good, doesn't necessarily mean that it is the best deck for you to be playing right now. Personal comfort level and personal playstyle definitely factors in very heavily as well. And in the same way that, like, while we had before the balance changes, you know, Jade Druid was, you know, obviously the biggest deal. But if you take a player who's really comfortable playing aggro but doesn't really know how to play a deck that goes to longer games like that, Jade Druid may not have been their best deck to play. Or, you know, Razaka's Priest might not be the best deck for them, you know, just because that's not a playstyle they're super comfortable with. So that's kind of why I asked that, and I think it's an important question for any player who's looking to, you know, okay, what deck should I play right now? I think it's an important question for them to ask themselves too, is what style do I feel most comfortable with? It's not to say that you should never venture out of your comfort zone, because if you're just looking to improve as a player overall, you absolutely should. I will say that Hearthstone's actually probably the first game that I've actually gravitated towards like straight aggro decks in, because I never did that like with any other card game, but I found some comfort level with it in Hearthstone, which is fun. But
I was gonna say that's actually kind of funny that you mentioned that, because I know that Fitz has been going on a bit of a tirade, at least in our personal conversations, about how the best way to play Hearthstone is to smash the face. So I thought that might be a good segue for Fitz to climb onto a soapbox again.
It is the best way, and I recall a certain light deck that was very aggressive. So I don't know what.
It was. I mean, I guess if I had Luminous Spark in play, maybe. I wouldn't call it aggro in the same way that like something like Pirate Warrior, which I enjoyed the heck out of, is. So.
Well, that was a tier aggressive deck. The light deck was not a top tier.
This is true,
deck, but it was an aggressive deck, and that's a different conversation for a different time.
Okay.
But and to kind of go towards what you're saying, I think there's a balance between that, because if someone, like for a little bit I was looking into the Freeze Shaman and I was like, oh, this deck looks pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I may want to try and play it, but it's awful. Like it's just terrible.
Right.
So it's important to also play something that can win. Like what are the odds of it winning? And then finding which deck that can win is best suited for the player, I guess.
Right. Yeah, and that's basically my main point, is you definitely want to have that balance of, you know, I mean, just because you know, really enjoy playing your, you know, silly homebrew deck that has like a 20% win rate. Now, if that's all you want to do, then that's cool. But again, if we're talking about what's most effective to try to climb the ladder with, then yeah, you definitely want to find that balance. But I think it's something that players sometimes forget about, is they just look at, okay, here's the overall win rate of this deck, so this is the deck I should be playing. And then they get frustrated when they're not finding that level of success with that deck. And they don't think about things like we were talking about earlier, the skill cap of that deck, how many games you actually need to put into that deck before you're comfortable with it and before you're piloting it efficiently. And also, does this deck fit your personal playstyle? So as I said, and then again, there's the players. Are you looking to just rank up as quickly as possible? Or are you looking to make yourself an overall better player to make not just Legend this month, but to make hitting Legend next month and the month after that much easier by broadening your own personal horizons? So as I said, every player is a little bit different. So there is no one correct answer, but these are the types of questions that everybody should be asking themselves as they are attempting to make that climb.
Most certainly. And I think kind of that sort of segues into our next point, into, and the next topic, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not looking at the paper right now, but, kind of looking at some of the decks that we were, looking at as far as, I don't want to say meta breaker, because that implies that we've cracked the meta game, which is not necessarily the case.
We are the best. We know everything. Listen to us.
Yeah, that is not a statement that I necessarily abide by.
We have solved Hearthstone. Sorry.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and quote you on Twitter for that.
That's right.
But are there any decks that you've been trying out on ladder lately that you've definitely been having success with, or is there anything that you're looking to try out? Justice, if you want to take that away, and then we'll just
so there's actually one that I just started playing today, which I'm excited to continue trying. It was, and I want to pull up because I want to give credit where credit is due. So give me a minute. I want to find. I will talk about the deck while I'm trying to find the person who originally. Derpy Troll. That's the one. Sorry. So Derpy Troll is the one who originally started this. I'm playing a slightly modified list. It's a slightly different take on Aggro Druid that actually it uses Pilfered Power, which for those who are unaware, and I don't blame you if you are, because it is a very obscure card if you're not already playing it, is a 3-mana Druid spell. You gain an empty mana crystal for every minion you currently have in play. So it's an aggro Druid deck that looks to take the board early. With obviously your normal things, Firefly, Enchanted Raven, Druid of the Swarm, these types of things. Stick a few minions early, play a Pilfered Power, and it actually has a little bit of late game with things like Ultimate Infestation that it runs. One list runs Bittertide Hydras, which is what I've been trying. I'm actually going to try switching those out for Cobalt Scalebanes. I think those are going to be a little more effective, given that the deck is trying to have multiple minions, so Scalebanes prevent a persistent threat. But it runs Bone Marrow 2 Ultimate Infestation, so it's actually pretty neat. So it is definitely still an aggro deck. It is definitely playing for early board control, and can win without Pilfered Power, Ultimate Infestation, that kind of thing. But it has that kind of really neat engine, so it might be slightly less consistent. We'll have to see. But it has a power that Aggro Druid did not have before, which is the ability to actually do something in the mid game and refill your hand with Ultimate Infestation, because that was one of the weaknesses of Aggro Druid before, was if they do clear your board a little bit, and you've played your cards, you're just done. The game's over. You have nothing left to do. So it gives you some options that old Aggro Druid didn't have. So I've only played a few games with it so far, but I've been reading on the competitive Hearthstone subreddit. Some people are having some success with it. I personally have already today beaten a Golden Mage and Golden Priest, so yay me. As a small sample size, for sure. But it's a deck that I think does have some potential, so I'm excited to see how far that can go with some tweaks that I'm making to it.
Nice. Fitz, I know that you had been playing Taunt Warrior on ladder, as you'd mentioned before. I know that you also used to play a lot of Shaman. So did you decide to break the free Shaman out of cold storage, or are you playing something else?
No, free Shaman. No, that deck needs to stay where it is. Actually, the best
in the freezer.
Freezer, yes. I've been playing an Elemental Shaman that I've had moderate success. That's what I've been doing best with so far, actually.
Okay. Are you running the Stone Sentinel to give you the top end for the taunts, or is it more just using Blaze Caller to burn them out?
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
Matter.
Nice. So, one thing that I definitely wanted to kind of think about is, why do you think you've had more success with that deck as opposed to the Taunt Warrior? I mean, other than just the general feeling that it might be more powerful, is there a particular thing about it that you feel is giving you the edge? Do you think that it maybe caters better to your playstyle?
I can attack.
I like that.
Nice.
Simple man with simple needs.
not playing like 1/4s that, yeah, it's great. It gives me like Stonehill Defender is an awesome card, but what can you really do with it to like apply pressure? You know, there is no pressure with that deck. I'm hiding until I can, complete the quest essentially.
To play Soul for Us and then die Insect until they die.
Then I can do stuff. I'm mainly like surviving with Lich King and what is the Drake called? The 8-mana
Primordial Drake.
There we go.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. And I mean, those are like top end cards. So in the meantime, I'm just like trying to stay alive, basically. Maybe play a weapon here or there. So I'm not really attacking very much with the Taunt Warrior deck. Maybe I'm playing it wrong. I'm not sure, but that's been my experience.
Nice. For me at least, so I can talk about myself a little bit.
Right.
I had been playing a few different decks. I tried out the Keliseth Rogue, which has been, fun. Although not my particular playstyle. I find that I struggle usually with Hunter and Rogue decks, just because that playstyle doesn't appeal to me all that much. I had been having some success with a like singleton Kazakus Death Knight Mage deck, which has been pretty fun, although not the best, but still not bad. The other deck that I definitely have been playing a lot of lately is kind of like a homebrew version of Aggro Priest, which has been
definitely going to need to explain to people.
Okay, so it's basically, it started out initially as like a hybrid like Silence Priest / like my deck runs minions that do more than one thing. Because one of the things that I never liked about the original Silence Priest build is that you would just have so many dead cards. So like if your initial like combo doesn't work and kill them right away, your deck is just so bad in the mid to late stages of the game. So I wanted to run a deck that could take advantage of some of those same cards, but not have so many blank draws in the deck. And so basically that resulted in swapping out some of like the Ancient Watcher and Humongous Razorleaf cards for minions that actually had effects.
They have effects. They can't attack. That's an effect.
Okay. Let me rephrase. Didn't have drawbacks. Okay. Don't have drawbacks. And then utilizing like the same like Divine Favor plus double Interfire package with Shadow Visions and such. And I had some success with that, but I was running into a lot of the same problems where the deck would have draws where it just didn't do anything. So, sorry. So I ended up cutting the Divine Spirit and Interfire package, which does hurt some of the burst potential of the deck, and I'm still not 100% sure if that's the right way. But now it's more of like a curve-out deck that just tries to utilize just strong early presence and tries to snowball off of like the 2-mana 2/2 that buffs one of your minions at the end of each turn by 1. Trying to utilize cards like Tark Reaper to hide that minion to try and snowball that effect, or Northshire Cleric. And then the deck also utilizes like Northshire Cleric plus Circle of Healing plus Wild Pyromancer to try and just draw a ton of cards. So that way you can deploy like Bittertide Hydra and then eventually burst them out with like multiple Mind Blasts or Leroy Jenkins or both.
You're running Valen?
Yes, it is also running Prince Valar or Valinar. I think its name is.
That's about Prophet Valen.
Oh no, actually I don't.
Okay.
I don't currently run Prophet Valen. Although it's something that I definitely considered. I am running Shadow Reaper Anduin because one thing I found is that, it does give me the ability to come back from a board that's kind of spiraled out of my control. It gives me more time, and it turns a lot of what would otherwise be blank draws, such as Circle of Healing or, random minion early on, into 2-mana damage cards that I could use to try and burn out the opponent. Another way that the deck definitely tries to take advantage is using Light Warden to combo with Pyromancer and Circle of Healing to produce high damage turns. In fact, I've killed somebody on the 4th turn of the game because they left a Light Warden up.
Nice.
And I was able to combine that with a Pyromancer plus a Circle of Healing and burst them down from like 25 on turn 4. So like the burst potential is definitely there. As far as my success is concerned, it comes and goes. There are certainly, like, it has good matchups and bad matchups. I did incorporate a package just to help fight for the early board, which has helped against decks that also run patches. So I'm still kind of toying with the list. I'm still trying to come up with it. I may try Velen in the future. as I think that's definitely a card that could help with the burst, as it's not uncommon for me to be sitting on like multiple Mind Blasts. And if the game doesn't end up abruptly, I do have the ability to survive until the later turns of the game thanks to the Priest hero power. So
Okay.
that's something definitely to explore, but it's also kind of a fine line where you don't want too many late game cards in a deck that's principally trying to end the game on turn 5 or 6.
How many late game cards are you currently running?
2 Bittertide Hydras, Leroy Jenkins, and Shadow Reaper Anduin.
Can we just talk about the fact that, and I'm not saying you're wrong, but you just named Bittertide Hydra and Leroy Jenkins as your late game, so I think that gives us an idea of where this deck is going. Okay.
Well, and that's the thing is that like a lot of the wins I know that I'm getting are because you're queuing when you queue up against a priest, you're not expecting them to curve out on you.
Right.
So a lot of opponents are going to be mulliganing away their anti-aggression tools early on, thinking that they're in for a hero power pass for turns 2 through 4, and that's not how this deck works at all. And so it has the potential to punish those kind of draws. So like against like slower controlling decks, I find that I usually have an easier time. I think largely because of that. Whereas against like the more tempo-oriented decks, it's a little bit of a harder battle.
What would you say your most common win condition is?
I'm sorry, Fitz was trying to.
Oh, I was just gonna say that I think what Justice was trying to imply about the late game is that I think the goalpost has moved with decks like Fatigue Warrior and whatnot. But continue your point, Justice.
Yeah, I was just asking what your most common win condition is with that deck, or how you most commonly find yourself closing games out.
Mind Blasts.
Yeah.
Just multiple Mind Blasts.
On what turn?
It kind of depends. If I'm able to like combo off with like Circle of Healing to like draw a ton of cards, then it could be as early as like turn 7, turn 5. So like Mind Blast just does a ton of damage. Like I just don't have any other way to explain it. It just 5 damage for 2 mana is a lot, and when you have multiples, it definitely helps. Also, being able to like Shadow Visions for like copies number 3 and 4 definitely makes a big difference. Since the deck only runs like 4 different spells, so you have a very high chance to hit Mind Blast with Shadow Visions.
We're gonna need
since
to.
It's like,
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
I was gonna say like because the deck spell list is 2 Shadow Visions, 1 Silent, 2 Power Word Shield, 2 Mind Blast, and 2 Circle of Healings. So it's a pretty limited spell pool, and a lot of times you're mulliganing for some of these cards. So,
right, we're gonna need. I was gonna say is that we're gonna need to have you give me your deck list, and I'll put it up here in post production. So unfortunately, I don't have it for this video, but anyone watching the VOD can take a look at your list and see what kind of craziness you have constructed here.
Sure, no problem. And definitely, if anybody wants to take it and run with it, go for it. It's not the easiest deck to play with. It's had definitely a bit of a learning curve on my own end, and I'm the person who, I was inspired by another list I saw online. My apologies, but I don't remember who I initially saw the first version from. I've since changed it by quite a bit since then, so it's kind of my own. And even I still have difficulty trying to play it sometimes. So it's not the easiest deck to play with. I don't advocate trying to ladder with this, especially at this point in the season. But if you're looking to try and have a good time, or maybe like surprise somebody with an aggressive priest deck, it's certainly something you could try out. And I'll go ahead and provide Justice with both the current version of the list and the one with the inner fires, so that he can compare contrast.
Yeah, that'll be good. It'll be good for the VOD for sure.
Well, I was gonna say, instead of just putting it up in post and then not having any commentary on it, before we move on to the next, to like what we think is going to be good and ranked, do you just want to go over the list real quick, just name every card, and then maybe Justice or I could stop you when there's something that needs explaining?
Sure, I can try that. It'll take me a second to open up the client, but I can open up Hearthstone for a second and see if I can pull it up.
In the meantime, our viewers get to watch your finger.
Yeah, for sure. I'll try and to do it with my right hand then. It'll make it easier.
We shouldn't.
All right. So while you're doing that, I'm going to take this opportunity to actually run down a couple surprises, I want to say, of things that are maybe better than people thought they would be, at least as of right now. So obviously the meta got changed a little bit with the balance changes to Druid, Warrior, Paladin, all these good stuff. So interesting note is Token Shaman is very good right now for those who like that playstyle. It was pretty decent before, but it's better now after those changes. Murloc Paladin, still a decent deck. For those who like that, it's still a like tier 1, tier 2 deck, just, FYI. Because as it turns out, even without War Leader buffing the health, still if you can curve out well, you can still overwhelm your opponents pretty nicely. Pirate Warrior is not dead, despite some predictions made, I think, on this show, as well as from a lot of pros, I think. Pirate Warrior not dead, still seems to be a solid tier 2 deck. Definitely not tier 1 like it was before, but exists, so there's that. Warlock, also not dead. Zoo has actually been coming back in a big way, to the point where it's actually established itself as kind of a tier 2, tier 3 deck, depending on where exactly in the ladder you're playing. But if you like that style and you're a big Warlock fan and you like Zoo, it's actually not a terrible choice right now. So, go nuts with that if that's kind of your thing. I know Owen's been messing around with a little bit too. You've always been a pretty big Warlock fan, so it's got to be good news for you, I think, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I have a history of paying oodles of life points for card draw.
Yeah.
So
very long, much longer than Hearthstone, but yes, they're just paying life points for fun, really, just because you could.
Yeah. So Bakura is my spirit animal.
Yeah.
So I do have the list up, by the way. If you want me to just go over it really quickly.
Yeah, just run it down.
Sure. So it's a 2 circle.
Oh, I guess Skype did not like the fact that Owen was about to go over his deck list. Oh, you're gonna want to start that one over, bud. You cut out for a minute there.
Yeah.
Sure. Bloodsail Corsair. 1 Silence, 2 Bloodsail Corsair, 2 Light Warden, 2 Norseer Cleric Patches, 2 Power Ward Shield, 2 Mind Blast, 2 Radiant Elemental, 2 Shadow Ascendant, which is the 2/2, 2 Shadow Visions, 2 Wild Pyromancer, 1 Cabal Talon Priest, 2 Tar Creeper, and then we have the late game of the 4-drop Prince Valinar, 2 Bittertide Hydra, Leroy Jenkins, and Shadow Reaper Endwin.
Okay, cool.
And the swap out that I did for the, if you want to include the Divine Spirit package, is swapping out Patches and the 2 Corsairs for 2 Inner Fires and a Divine Spirit.
Okay. I did find it amusing that basically what you said was that you included Patches to counter Patches, so we're really established of kind of where that particular card's power level is.
I mean, it wasn't just to counter Patches specifically. A lot of it too was the prevalence of Hunter on the ladder, and that being able to Corsair into Patches does a really good job of clearing away alley cats.
Yes, it does.
Also, nothing feels as good as being able to Corsair plus Patches and then coin out the Power Word Shield to kill the 1/1 and leave 2 1/2s available.
I dig it.
So.
Okay,
Nice.
cool.
So as far as Justice, were you done with? Did you still have decks that were surprisingly good?
I think that more or less covers it. I will say that one of my personal favorites of Hand Buff Paladin is not a deck that I would recommend to ladder with, but if you really love it, it could be worse. It's about a tier 3 deck right now. So it is a deck. It is a thing that exists. It is not your best option, but it is there if it's something you like. And I really love Hand Buff Paladin. I've tried a bunch of different lists. I'm probably still going to try 1 or 2 other lists that I haven't yet. It's a fun deck. It's a very iffy deck, and that like when it works, it really works, and when it doesn't, you're just kind of getting run over. But I like it a lot, so I'm gonna throw that one out there as my last little thing. But I think that's it. The only other thing that maybe is flying under the radar a little bit is Secret Mage, because that deck was powerful for a while. Kind of took a bit of a nosedive, but has now really reestablished itself as a solid like tier 2 deck, and does do well against certain parts of the meta. It does have a fair number of both good and bad matchups, but overall is a pretty reasonable performer for those like Fitz maybe who want to be a wizard. So you still can.
I was gonna say I actually really like Hand Buff as well, but why would you say it is where it is? Like, why is it tier 3? Is it because it's too slow? Is it too slow? Is it something else?
It is somewhat slow. It does have trouble keeping up with an aggro deck that has a fast start, or something like Tempo Rogue, which gets a fast start. It definitely can feel like you're playing from behind a lot there. It also, on the other end of the spectrum, can sometimes struggle against control decks if you don't get your minions out early, even if they're not buffed. If you're not able to build up a decent threat early enough, their late game is usually better than yours if they especially have removal for your key minions. So it's really, you kind of have to hit that sweet spot of making sure that you're taking the board early enough. Now, if you do, and you can keep pumping out those buff minions, a lot of decks will struggle to deal with it. So, like as I said, those games where you do win, a lot of times feel really, really good, and that's why I like the deck. Is you feel like you're doing unfair things. Like, hey, these minions should not be this big. It's great. If you can get something like your Grime Street Enforcer, unanswered for several turns, or just buffing your hand, multiple times. And the Smuggler's Run, and you just drop like this huge thing that is much bigger than what your opponent is used to seeing. That just feels really cool. So I like that. But yeah, it's a little bit inconsistent and is, depending on draws, susceptible to both aggro and control in different ways. So I think that's why, as when you draw well in good situations, you can have a really good time. But if the aggro or control deck draw better than you, then they're both capable of beating you. So I think that's why it's sitting at tier 3.
I see. So it's not even necessarily that the deck doesn't have a thing that it can do. It's just maybe not as consistent as it needs to be in order to do that thing well enough to make it a reasonable choice compared to other things that you could be playing.
Right, and I think that's actually fair, because if it was consistently doing all of those things, then it would probably be busted, honestly, because I said you're playing minions that are a lot bigger than they're supposed to be. So if it was able to just do that like every game, we just lost Owen again. That poor guy. So. I almost want, wait, here he comes. There he is. Look, it's Owen again. Yeah. So anyway, so as I was saying, you're making your minions much bigger than they're supposed to be. Quote unquote supposed to be. So if that's something that you can just do in most games, then that's probably unfair. Because those games where you win, I said they feel really good because you're just like, oh my god, look at my minions. They're amazing. Like, So if you could do that very consistently, then it would probably feel pretty bad for your opponents. Which is kind of why people are so, or some people are so disgusted with Tempo Rogue right now. They're just like, well, when my opponent goes turn 1, coin Keleseth, Shadow Step Keleseth, I just, I already lost that game. Like, some people are not thrilled with that, and that's kind of what you're looking at, with Hand Buff Paladin, just in a slightly different way. So yeah, if it were super consistent, I think it would probably be pretty busted. So I think it's probably okay where it is. It could probably stand to be a slightly stronger than it is now without being oppressive, but I don't think it should be extremely consistent just for the health of the game. But it's not going to stop me from playing it either way. So,
do you think maybe that the current lists that are available are just not optimized, or that there might be some other tech way to build the deck that could make it better?
Maybe. I mean, I will say the patron saint of Hand Buff Paladin, Brian Kibler, has messed around with several different lists, and obviously we can't look at his overall success rate as indicative of the total deck, in that he obviously is at a different skill level than your average player, but it's still been somewhat inconsistent with him too. So I think that part of it might be not fully optimized deck list, because usually, even with your pro players who are really good with a certain deck, you don't really get a fully optimized deck list until you kind of have that whole collective hive mind working on it. And you have like a whole community, all coming together, trying different things, and eventually figuring out what's working and what's not. Even if you have one really good player, one player is never going to, or usually not going to completely perfect a deck archetype. So it's possible that it might not be a completely optimized list, but I don't think even a completely optimized list is ever going to be, at least with the current card pool, I don't think it'll be a tier 1 deck or anything. And current card pool matters in that, some of this is from Mean Streets of Gadgetzan, which will be rotating out with the first expansion in 2018. So I don't know what that'll mean for Wild, but I know for Standard, there's definitely a limited lifespan here to figure it out. So
you're right. If it's ever going to be a thing, it has to be soon.
Yeah.
So, how are we doing on time?
I think it's about time to get, we have about 15 minutes or so. I mean, we can go a little bit over, but I'd say we should probably dive into our next topic.
Okay, because I actually have to dip in like 5 minutes.
Oh, okay. Well then, you know what? Then let's save the topic for next time because I think it'll still be relevant. I think we can just close out on this here because I think this is still very relevant for any players who are not, you know, hitting top legend ranks every single month. I think this is still pretty relevant, so we can finish out on this.
For sure. So closing thoughts then, Justice. Overall, what do you think is just, you know, one deck, like you have to hit legend this month, you have your current time available to do it, what deck are you playing?
Oh, Tempo Rogue, hands down. That's easy.
All right. Fitzroy?
I don't know, some form of aggressive shaman that I can throw together, I guess.
The look on your face while you're saying that indicates a supremely high level of confidence.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we need to hook this man up with the mid-range token shaman deck
Yeah.
list.
I'm interested in that.
Yeah, I'll look you up, man. You got it.
Yeah. And I think for me, if I have to hit legend this month, the deck that I'm likely playing to do it, oh god, I don't even know. I'd say probably token shaman if I had to pick one.
Yeah.
Just because it's an aggressive deck.
Yeah.
Sounds right on my side.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, for sure.
Token Shaman definitely got better after the changes, just because it didn't have, you know, it doesn't have Pirate Warrior beating it down nearly as much. While Murloc Paladin is still
It also
good,
doesn't
I'm sorry?
Well, it's that too. It's that it doesn't have to compete with the same aggressive lineup that it used to, but it also, one of its like mortal enemies, Jade Druid, is no longer as prevalent due to the new texture of the metagame.
Mhm.
So, because like running it, like if you're playing the token deck and you run into a spreading plague, it's like hitting a wall.
Oh yeah, you just if you have like a board full of little dudes and you don't have like a big evolve effect immediately
tokens.
there, and they just spreading plague, you just
Well, like the brutal thing too about it is like even if you're sitting on a board of totems and you bloodlust, your totem still can't kill the stupid scarabs.
yeah, yeah, that's
You
true.
still need to run multiple totems into one scarab to kill it. It's just
yeah.
it's awful. It's awful.
Hey, have we ever mentioned that like 1/5 scarabs are kind of BS and we don't like it? Have we ever talked about that? I feel like maybe we may have.
I'm not sure if that's ever come up, but I think it's something hold for next time.
Yeah, no, that'll be a new and fresh topic to talk about.
Spreading plague, but not necessarily what spreading plague gives you.
I'm sorry? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like,
Card's still
All
set.
right, well, well, I guess we should just go ahead and wrap it up. For those of you who don't know, you can check us out at JDG Gaming. Did I say that right?
You got it.
Yes.
Yay!
Saying like all weekend. We're on Twitter. We have a Facebook as well as a YouTube, and you can watch us all do stuff that we normally do there.
Yes. I will say that Fitz, you started a new series where you're trying to kind of show off your ladder adventures. So for anyone looking for the perspective of someone who's, you know, really, I think, what was your stated goal? To try to hit single digit rank? Because you haven't done that yet, right?
Yep.
Okay. So for the vast majority of players, I think that's a pretty relatable experience. So I strongly encourage you guys to check Fitz out on those videos. Of course, all of us are still providing content for the site as time and otherwise work schedules allow. And of course, we will have another Judgment Gaming exhibition match coming up next week. Is that right, Owen? Is that what we're looking
Yes. Next week. Next week we're looking for it. Hopefully Thursday, but that's tentative. So
Okay.
We'll keep you posted.
Yeah, so definitely make sure that you're following on Twitter. Specifically follow at JDG Justice, which is me, or at JDG_gaming for everything. So we will tweet out about that as we have the schedule finalized, but you should be able to look for that next week, as we do have not our current champion, but a previous champion most likely coming back for another crack at glory. So it should be fun, and I'm looking forward to that.
Very nice.
Indeed. All right. Well, without further ado, I'll go ahead and close it out for the day. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and we hope to catch you next week.
All right, we'll see you soon.
Take it easy.